Roberts, the editor of the Security Ledger, and I'm here with our keynote speaker at the Security Things Forum, which is Dan, who is Dan Geer, who's a CISO at In-Q-Tel. Dan, you gave an amazing speech today. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're entirely welcome. Thank you for asking.
Okay, I'm going to start with sort of the big controversial notion, and let me know if I got it wrong, and if I didn't, kind of help us understand this. One of the things you were saying really is it's more useful to think about embedded devices, almost like biological devices, in that when you release them into the environment, when you release them, deploy them, if they have an automated update capability, in essence, they can persist forever beyond not necessarily their useful life, but certainly their secure life, their dependable life. And then maybe organizations, companies that make these devices should think about reevaluating that, putting some kind of end of life or kill switch into these. Is that a correct characterization?
It seemed to me that something that's immortal needs to be, well, as I said in the talk, needs to be angelic. I don't think we're quite to the design point where we can do angelic yet, so I think immortal's a bad idea. Now, either you take the assumption that we will continue to provide upgrades for as long as they're deployed, or we don't. I wrote a column recently on, the title was on abandonment. You know, in any other part of society, whether it's your car or your bank account or your children or your land or whatever, if you abandon it, eventually something else will happen. We don't have that here. And so one of the questions I might ask is, if there is a code base in wide use because of deployment, because of immortality and deployment, does it have to be supported or replaced, or does it eventually get treated like an abandoned bank account or an abandoned child? Does it go somewhere else? I mean, if we're going to be depending on it, we don't know how to rebuild it from scratch, which is, I suspect, largely the case. Can the vendor actually get away with saying we're not going to support it anymore, or do they have to have a recall in some sense? I mean, I'm in no way picking on Microsoft for this, but they're in the news right now about XP, and frankly, there's so many ATM machines at banks that are running on that. What do they do? What do they do? Right.
And of course, this wasn't always the case. Microsoft made a very concerted effort to get into the embedded systems market with Windows back in the late 90s, really took over that market, and there were certainly people at the time who said this could be a real problem going forward. Now we're kind of there with XP, which is a very popular embedded operating system, end of life. We saw another...
What do you do about end of life? It's a real question. I mean, if end of life is interpreted to mean the vendor no longer supports, that's one thing. If end of life is it isn't going to work after January 1st, remember what we did for Y2K. Remember the kind of fire drill we went through where we gave incentives, we gave a kind of permission to do things we don't ordinarily do, like cooperating in ways that might violate antitrust, where we set up observation posts, so when the clock strikes 12, did the elevator stop? You know, I mean, do we need that here?
So another issue that speaks to that, Cesar Cerruto, the researcher with IOActive, is going to be publishing some research looking at vulnerabilities in traffic management systems, embedded systems, field deployed systems that are vulnerable to remote attack. The vendor in this case is saying, this is the way we design these systems. Our customers aren't asking for these features, or we fix this. If you want it, get the new product. In other words, do a forklift upgrade. That's not that uncommon in embedded systems space. What should these vendors be doing instead? So looking forward to say, let's not end up in this situation again. What's a way to circumvent that design around?
I doubt there's a single answer to that question. I mean, I imagine there's a bunch of them. In the talk, I refer to Dan Farmer's IPMI work, which I suggest is probably, having not read the one you were just speaking of, I imagine it's similar, and that is to say that the ability to control things remotely is both good and bad. In fact, I almost think that all security products are dual use, meaning they can be used for offensive or for defensive purposes. And that may well be the case, that whatever you're talking about for remote management of something that is inherent in society, whether it's traffic or whatever, it may be that any kind of control mechanism can be used for good or for bad. And in the real world, so to speak, when something can be used both ways, we have rules about how to deploy that. Two people have to have the switch that launches launches the missile or whatever. Maybe we have to go to that, or maybe we have to have a concurrence of two automatic systems, or maybe we have to have something where the nature of it has a built-in escalation. If this is the third time it is asked to do X, I dealt with a bank in New York which had a very well automated ability to remove someone from authority. You know, if someone quit, you want to get their authority to get data out of the picture as quick.
Deprovision, they call it.
Deprovisioning, right. That was the word I was looking for. Their deprovisioning system was very fast. At the same time, they had programmed around that, if the deprovisioning system has gotten rid of 100 people today, stop and don't restart until a human comes and does it. And that has saved their bacon at least once, because you don't want the automatic control system, which may most days be your salvation, to also be something that, either because it was taken over badly or it failed, to produce a fault. And that, I think, illustrates the dual use aspect without even having to invoke, the Ukrainian mob or something.
Dan Geer, thank you so much for joining us at Security Things. It was such a pleasure having you.